this. The Father is called Yahweh God, the Spirit is called Yahweh God, and Jesus is called Yahweh God. There's only one Yahweh. How do we figure this out? So what they do is eventually they come up with this language of being and person. Being describes what you are. Person describes who you are. This chair has being, right? It's what philosophers called ontological status, right? But it doesn't have personhood. I didn't ask its permission to sit on it.
Right.
But it does exist.
Yeah.
And so being is what you are. So God is Yahweh. And we see this in the sense that Jesus tells his disciples to go baptize in the name, onoma in Greek, it's a singular. And then he says of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So he says the singular name, but then he describes three persons. And so this is the question the early church is wrestling through when they say, okay, Jesus is given the honors, the attributes, the names, the deeds, and the seat of God. It's an acronym, HANDS. The Spirit is given the honors, the attributes, the names, the deeds, and the seat of God. And the Father is given the honors, the attributes, the names, the deeds, and the seat of God. There's only one God. How do we understand this? Now, the ancient Jews actually already had a concept of this in that they weren't Unitarian fully. They understood that God is complex within his unity and that God can rule and reign in heaven, and yet the Ark of the Covenant could still have God's presence. And we even see examples when before Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham is met by three individuals, two that are identified as angels and one that is identified as Yahweh God. The angels go off to Sodom and Gomorrah to find Lot and his family. Abraham dialogues with Yahweh. Eventually, Abraham leaves, and then in chapter 19, in Genesis 19, it has this really interesting passage where it says that Yahweh on earth rains fire and brimstone from Yahweh in heaven. Now, you only have one Yahweh, so what's going on there? Well, we would say, within like a Christian framework, this is the pre-incarnate Christ, okay? He is not, enfleshed in who Jesus is, but this is the complex unity, and the Jews understand this, and even early on in rabbinical Judaism, there's a concept of the Shekinah glory, which is the presence above the ark, that God is ruling and reigning in heaven, and yet there's also this idea that kind of gets fleshed out in Kabbalism of the Shevrot, which are like the presence and spirit of God all throughout the earth. So in that sense, ancient Judaism, sometimes it's called the two powers in heaven. I don't love that kind of articulation, but in academia, that's what it's called. That God is ruling and reigning in heaven and still has a presence on earth. And that God is complex within his unity, only one God, but there's something else going on there that maybe we don't fully understand, but then is teased out in its fullness in the New Testament with the Son, which is a title of familiarity. It's not like a birth son. But the Father and the Son, those are kinship terms. But they have existed, like I said before, in a set of living, loving relationships. It has always been three, and they've existed eternally as three. The Spirit is teased out a little bit in the Old Testament. You have these kind of like these Easter eggs of Jesus throughout the burning bush, right? It says that the messenger of God spoke from the bush. And so you have these sort of things. The early Christians are wrestling through these things and coming up with some good ideas, some bad ideas in order to formulate the language of this. Eventually, they come up with this idea, one being in three persons. Being describes what you are, persons describe who you are.